Good morning. This morning we have David Nance with us. We've been a longtime supporter of the work that he's doing now in India, and we're looking forward to hearing what he has to say over what's been going on the past few years. We're going to have John Grantham come up and lead us in prayer, and then I'm going to hand it over to Brother Nance.
Our Father in heaven, we're thankful for this morning. We thank you, Father, for waking us. We thank you, Father, for giving us the measure of health we have and enjoy. We thank you, Father, for giving us the presence of mind to choose to be here. Father, we thank you for Brother David. We thank you for the work he does in India. We thank you for blessing him. We pray you will continue to bless him, and may his effort prove fruitful. We pray, Father, that we this morning will be attentive to his words. And we pray, Father, that we will also be attentive to his work. We pray, Father, you'll bless us this day. We pray that each and everything we do today will please you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Let's see. Okay, I'm on. All right. Well, thank you. I'm very, very glad to be able to be back again. And, you know, if you want a good cup of coffee, the Bradfords have it. Yes. So, anyway, thank you for hosting me very much. And it's been a while since I've been back. I'm glad to be able to. If you don't mind, I'd like to conduct this as a class. So if you have a question or a thought or an idea, then please just raise your hand or speak up, and we'll carry it that direction here. Let me kind of move this thing out of here, if you don't mind. That way I can back up just a little bit. You know, usually people don't sit on the third row. You know, usually they sit about 3/4 back. Well, anyway, you have most of you have received those little yellow envelopes there. You all have been supporting our work for a long time, both congregationally and individually. I want to tell you that I thank you on behalf of the brethren there and just on behalf of myself. It makes a tremendous amount of difference. I'm not going to talk a lot about that side of the work, but I want you to know that I appreciate it deeply. Also, I'd like to ask you, if you can, to find a way to maybe help us a little bit more than what you have been doing. And the reason is because, well, during COVID, I expected our contributions to go down, because congregations weren't meeting and all of that. That did not happen. Our contributions stayed level, and that just was a great blessing and a surprise to me. But now that we've entered into the phase of post-COVID, but current inflation, now our contributions are declining somewhat. And obviously that doesn't help, but particularly the widows and the orphans and the brethren we support over there, that hurts them a lot more than you might imagine this, because for us, if the price of eggs doubles, well, we just kind of complain and eat our eggs. But over there, if the price of eggs doubles, they actually buy fewer eggs. And so if you can help in any way a little bit more, please do that. You can mail those in, or you can hand them to me today. But that's all I'm going to say about that. I just want you to know I really deeply appreciate your letting me be a part of your work, which is actually how it really is. This is your work, and I'm just kind of an agent to be there on the ground. Does anybody have any questions that you'd like me to start off with answering about the India work? Because you've been involved in it for a long time. You may have something on your mind that isn't in my presentation. And so if anybody has a question or something you'd want me to address, please just speak up.
About how large is the church in India?
How large is the church in India? I don't know. Well, the reason I say that is, I had some brethren down in Birmingham ask me one time. They said, well, how many faithful congregations are there in Bangalore? Was what the question was. And I said, well, how many faithful congregations are in Birmingham? Nobody knows, because of the individual congregational nature of it. But I will tell you this: it is significant. We have more schools of preaching in India than in here. We have more gospel preachers in India than we do here, more congregations in India than we do here, more of everything in India than we do here, except resources. And we also have more people who really want to hear the message than here. And so the answer to your question is I really can't tell you, but I am quite sure there are more congregations of the Lord's church there than there are here. Having said that, there are almost none like this. Most of them are in house churches, which of course obviously multiplies the number of congregations, but limits the number of members per congregation. Does that kind of get in the direction you were looking? Okay. Any other thought or idea? Yes, sir.
What about the Muslim population there? How does it affect the church?
What about the Muslim population is the question. There are more Muslims in India than in any other country in the world. That's a surprise to most people because, we think of Saudi Arabia and Egypt and some of these other places. But, the population of India is 1.4 billion, and 13% of those are Muslims. Now, 13% of 1.4 billion is a bunch. But if you go to these other countries that are like 100% or 99% Muslim, well, 100% of not many people is still not many people. So really it is. The second thing about Islam in India, it doesn't affect the church directly in any way pretty much, but on a local basis it does affect the church because there are more Muslims being converted to Christ in India than any other place on planet Earth. And the main reason for that is that Muslims in India are scattered all over the country. They're not enclaved in one, little spot. Now, I'm not saying they don't enclave. They have their little area in this town, a little area. They kind of hang together as families often do. But they're spread around. And what that means is that for 1,000 years, these Muslims have been actively interacting with their neighbors. Now, if you're a Muslim, you are a monotheist. You believe in one God. If you're a Hindu, you believe in, however many. And the conversation religiously between Hindus and Muslims is a non-starter. They've been talking about it for 1,000 years, and Muslims have been really well known to put a sword to the throat in the conversation. Hindus sometimes return the favor. And so the religious conversation between Muslims and Hindus, even though they interact with each other on a social or a business basis, the religious conversation is not much. But when a Hindu converts to Christ, all of a sudden, that former Hindu, now monotheist Christian, has something to talk about with his Muslim neighbor. And Indians love to talk about religion. They're absolutely unlike Americans. Let me ask you, when you go to a party, what do you know not to talk about? Two things. Everybody knows that. In India, that stipulation does not exist. And so what happens is the reason that we are converting more Muslims over there, it's on an ad hoc basis. It's not like an American can go in there and do this for them. Because the Muslims, how much are they going to listen to an American? None. But they will listen to their neighbors. And so virtually every place I go, the local preacher will tell me something along the lines of, well, we converted a Muslim family last week, or, we converted 2 Muslims a month ago, and on and on. It's just a kind of a repeated, I can't give you stats for it, any more than I can give you stats on how many churches there are. And of course, it's because of it's not an organized, centralized, it's organized on local, places, but it's not a centralized database that we can draw on. Does that kind of get to your question?
And maybe related to that, of course, in a lot of Muslim countries, if somebody converts out of Muslim faith, then they end up being targets. Does that happen there?
It does, and it also happens when Hindus convert to Christ. He's asking, do the converts become targets? Yes, they do. But India, you have to realize, India is committed to stopping this religious violence. They had that huge civil war in 1947-48 that ended up in the splitting of the country into what was then East Pakistan and West Pakistan for the Muslims, and then, of course, the rest of India for the Hindus. So they are committed to stopping that stuff. And one place you don't want to spend a single day is in an Indian jail. And so, yes, there is some of it, but it is more on the order of a serious level of discrimination instead of what you and I think of as persecution, you know, rocks and knives and burnings and things like that. So yes, it is real. The second thing of that is it's also on a family-by-family basis, because not every family, you know, treats, you know, their converted family members in the same way. Some are just laissez-faire about it, and some are not. Does that answer your question a little bit? Okay. All right, well, let me kind of move on a little. Where did I put that clicker thing? Here it is. Let me move on a little bit, and let's see. Go. There we are. This is a little bit of a strange-looking map. The reason it's strange is because it's a population map. It's the size of the country. The shapes are kind of sort of right, but the size is based on the amount of people who live in that particular country. So in a map like this, you would expect, of course, that China and India are the big boys on the block. Now, China has for years and years been slightly ahead of India on the population. They have pretty much an equal population, but not exactly. But surprise, surprise, we have found out, demographers and UN people and all that who work with these numbers have found out that for years the Chinese Communist Party has been lying about their population. Surprise, surprise. And it turns out that India actually is the most populous nation on the country, in the world, nation in the world. India has 1.4 billion. But now I want you to wrap your mind around it. Here's where I'm going with this, okay? It's not just merely numbers and statistics. I want you to feel really good about what you are doing in India. And it starts out with, I think of the analogy of a shoe salesman. If I were selling shoes, it occurs to me that on average, where I would sell more shoes is where there are more feet. And so when you begin to do preaching and sharing the gospel of Christ, where there are more people, you obviously have more opportunity. Now, it helps a lot if those people are right next to your shoulder, instead of having to travel so many miles to get to them. And in India, 1.4 billion, as I'll get into later, but I want to show you how different that is. You take a look at the U.S. here, you can see that the U.S. is clearly a lot smaller. The United States is 3 times the size of India. 3 times the size, land mass, but not even close population-wise. We have 332 million, according to the last census. 332 million, that's about 1/4 of the size. So one of us, 4 of them. Woo. But look at this. If you were to take, oops, that wasn't what I meant to do. Oh, there we go. Thank you. Let's see here. If you take a look at that, there's little Canada, then the U.S., Mexico, Central America, South America, all the Caribbean islands and all that. If you were to combine all those little pixels together, what you would notice is that there are more people in India than in our whole half of the world. Wow. What you all need to do is maybe share that little piece of information with your grade school, middle school, maybe even high school kids. And then ask them to say, well, if there's so many more people on that side of the world, why doesn't the world wobble when it spins? Well, I used to work in Africa. You may recall from some conversations we've had before. I worked in Africa for 10 years before I started working in India in 2007. And Africa's a great place for the Lord's work. I don't mean anything about it. But you know, Africa is 9 times larger than India, but India has more people than all of Africa combined. And if you're looking for a place to carry the gospel to, I mean, this is where it's at. I mean, it's really something. So I hope you're feeling good about that. Any questions or thoughts on that idea? All right, well, this is a list showing of cities in India that are at least 1 million in population. It just keeps on going, keeps on going. In the United States, in the last census, there are 10 of these cities. And you could probably just, think in your head and figure out which 10 cities they are. But in India, 47 cities of at least 1 million people. That's a fruitful place to share the message. Now, this is just a regular old map, and showing you the major cities in India. This is New Delhi, or Delhi. That's the capital of India, one of the most polluted cities you've ever been to. Spend literally a half hour, 45 minutes out in their traffic, and your eyes are going to start to water, at least mine do. So anyway, this is Mumbai. It used to be known as Bombay. The Indians are trying to change a lot of the British, English influence in some of their names, so they're changing some of their names. That's the most well-known city in India, Bombay or Mumbai. Over here is Calcutta. Used to be known as Calcutta. Do any of you remember Mother Teresa and the work she used to do with the poor and all that? That's where she did most of her work there. This is the city of Hyderabad, where we often fly into, and we have a good amount of work there. That's a small place of 15 million people. The largest city in the U.S. is New York, and that's 8 million. And this is Chennai. It's a bit smaller. We have a very large amount of work in Chennai. That's only 5 million. And then this city here is Bangalore. That's actually where our office is. That's a city of 12 million. When you call India to talk to tech support, or they ship your phone call over to India, it's often to Bangalore or to Hyderabad, one of those two places. Any thoughts or ideas? Well, let's see here. This is just a map of the states of India. The colors don't mean anything. They're just something to help you be able to visually see where the states are and what they kind of look like. This is 1.4 billion people, but let me kind of help you wrap your mind around what that is, all right? In India, 35,000 people die every single day. I don't know if you ever thought about that. And the only people who notice these deaths are their friends and family, because it's just the normal flow of life and death. There's just that many people there. I mean, how many people live in Huntsville area? Close to 400,000. It would take 10 days, 12 days to wipe out this whole place. At that rate, 35,000 a day. Woo, that's a lot. But there's an upside. 76,000 are born every day, and that's more than 2 to 1. Now, as interesting as that is, it's not only interesting, it's important. The reason it's important is because when a population is growing organically like this, growing by having babies, not immigrants. Now, believe me, India is not a place people immigrate to very often. It's a place they try to get out of. But when a population is growing by having babies, the average age of the population gets younger and younger and younger. The average age of an Indian is 24 years old. Wow. Now, you think about that. Any place you go in India, whether it's to a grocery store, a market, a fair, a movie, a school, a football game, well, of course, they don't play real football, they play soccer. Whatever else it is you're going, anywhere you go, just walking down the streets, over one half the people you see will be under the age of 30. Whoa, that's a youth group. Now, that's also not just interesting, it's important. Now, the reason that is so is think about what you know about young people. You know at least two things. First off, you know that young people are often more open-minded to talking about the life-changing message of Jesus than older people are set in their ways. Isn't that right? All us older people, raise your hand. Yeah. Well, that's why churches focus on young people, and they should. We focus on our youth groups. That's why congregations that are in areas with a military base or areas with a university or college town, those congregations often experience a higher conversion rate. I was converted when I was 20 years old in the military. And so you were converted, Brian, I think you mentioned while you were in college. Okay. Yeah, that's quite normal. So that's one factor that is important in this. But the second factor about young people that you know, if you just think about it, is that young people are often very willing to question the tradition of their elders. Have you noticed that? Oh, yeah. Now, in America, when the young people question the tradition of their elders, what do they usually become? That's right, nothing. Oh, I'm still spiritual. I don't go to church, but I'm spiritual. Don't you know? Doesn't that make them feel good? What it really is, they say, I'm spiritual, which means you shut up. And the other thing about being spiritual in that sense is it's such an easy thing to be, because being spiritual doesn't change a single thing you do, a single thing you want, a single thing you plan for. It doesn't change a single thing about the way you talk, the way you walk, the way you treat anybody. It doesn't change a single thing about your existence at all, except it makes me feel so good inside. Well, that's Americans. And we all know that this is what happens. In India, it ain't so. Excuse my southern. It ain't so. The reason it isn't is because you and I are taught when we were little kids, from the time we were little kids, we were taught to be ashamed of our faith. And some people look, what do you mean when I say that? Well, you'll recognize it. We are taught from the time we are little that your faith is yours and yours alone. You don't convert other people. You don't try to persuade other people. You don't bring your religious ideas into the party. You remember the two things we don't talk about? That's right. We're taught to be, it's compartmentalized. It's in your wallet. It's in your back pocket. It's not anything you talk about or flaunt. It's not anything you inquire about. If you start asking about religion, then you're going to be the odd man or odd woman out in the conversation, because nobody else wants to talk about it. In India, it ain't that way. In India, from the lowest time of their lives, the youngest times of their lives, well, think about this. When you were a kid, even when I was a kid, what kind of reading material do we give people to learn how to read? Well, it's See Spot Run, Jack and Jill went up the hill and those kinds of things. In India, when they're teaching their young people how to read, they read the stories of the gods. They are taught to talk about religion constantly, all the time, anywhere, out on your sleeve. Their little idols are in their cars. Their little idols are in their homes. They're on the street corners. They're everywhere, the little idols are. And so what happens is, in America, when some young person decides to question their faith, that means abandon the hunt for truth. In India, when a young person decides to question the tradition of their elders, usually the various hundreds of gods that they have, when they start questioning the reality of that, they don't become nothing. They start looking for the truth. And anywhere you find people who are looking for the truth, that is where we want to be. And that is where ye have been and are, and I hope you feel good about it. Yes, sir.
Based on what you're saying, I would conclude that atheism and Darwinism are not pushed there like they are here.
They're not pushed. I'm not saying they're not unknown, particularly in their, colleges and things like that, where they're trying to interact with the rest of the world. Not saying they are unknown, but you have to understand too about their idolatry and stuff like that. One of the core things about their idolatry is that there is no truth. So who cares which way you go? You see. But when they start getting tired of that, one of the corollaries to that, one of the results of the idea that there is no truth is there's also no meaning in life, there's no purpose in life, there's no hope in life, there's no guidance for life. And so you begin to see why the young people are just, well, what's the point of this kind of thing? Does that kind of get to your point? Okay. Any other thoughts or ideas? Well, my feeling is this. If you can't get excited about doing mission work in a place like India, well, let me show you this. In India, so many Hindus are converting, over 14,000 per day are leaving their Hindu idolatry and embracing the gospel of Jesus Christ. Now, when I say embracing Jesus, that's a broad term, because the denominations are active in India just as we are. But how would you like to do mission work in a place where over 14,000 people more today than yesterday want to hear the message that you've been charged by the Lord to share? that's just an exciting place to do it. And in my mind, if you can't get excited as a Christian about working in a place like this, then you just need to go to the doctor. Any other thoughts or ideas?
Well, related to that, what about the government officials? Do they tend to be Hindus or others?
Well, the government officials in India almost always are Hindu. India is a place of, you've heard this term identity politics, any of you? Okay. Identity politics is where you're not so much treated as an individual, but you're treated as a member of a group. Your individual qualifications or competence or disqualifications or training, your individual character and background and all of that don't really very much matter in identity politics. America is a kind of an individualistic society in that, we try to, as Martin Luther King said, I dream of the day when my kids will be judged on the content of their character rather than the color of their skin. Well, see, that's the exact opposite of identity politics. Well, identity politics has been growing here in the U.S., and you know that. I mean, now everybody wants to know, are you white, or are you black, or are you young, or are you old, or are you male, or are you female, or are you alphabet soup, LGBTQXRYZ, LMNO, and so on it goes. And that becomes far more important in how people deal with you than dealing with you as an individual, and that's identity politics. Now, it's not everywhere in the U.S. by any stretch, but it's unfortunately, in my mind, it's gaining ground. India is an identity politics place from top to bottom, side to side. But in India, the identity that matters is not your race or any other thing like that. Here, it's your religion. 70 to 80%, depending on locality, of Indians are Hindu. And their whole society is built around that. Of course, that means they control the legislature, they control the judges, they control the executive branch of government, all of that is that way. So yeah, most of the time when we're interacting with the government, we're interacting with Hindus. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that they are hostile to us. The upper level of the Indian government is becoming more and more hostile as time goes by. But the populace, particularly the more low caste, poor economically, those people are ever more open to the gospel because of the hopelessness of their lives, and they see the hopelessness. If you're an upper caste in India, it's like being a normal American. You can convince yourself everything's all right because my 401k is in place and I have my health care and I've got my retirement set up and I can make my house payments and I have my air conditioner and my heater and my car, and so you can convince yourself that everything is fine and you can put the eternal life and spiritual life on the back burner easily in America. Well, the upper crust in India can do that too, and they do. But the vast majority of the population is not that way, and so they don't put spiritual things on the back burner. They put spiritual things, they put the important things in the important place. Does that kind of get to your question? Okay. Any other thoughts or ideas?
How strong is the caste system?
How strong is the caste system? It's illegal in India. It is everywhere in India. Even their upper caste politicians make a great deal. If one of them gets married, they make a great big deal out of this person I'm marrying is of the same caste as me. And even though it's all supposed to be illegal, it's all very, very real. Yes, sir.
In India, over here, being the Church of Christ is typically the low man on the totem pole when you rank them to Baptist and Pentecostal and stuff. Well, where does that rank out over there as far as Christianity goes?
Okay, saying that the Church of Christ is kind of low man on the totem pole here. You talking about just population-wise, the numbers-wise?
Being a Christian versus denomination.
It's pretty much equal, depending on where you go, of course. But where our churches are, where I have been with our churches, we're very successful. Let me share something about this with you, okay? Historically, the churches of Christ have always grown the fastest where there is a base population of people who already believe in Jesus and already have a respect for the Bible. You think about that. Churches of Christ have always grown the fastest, where what we're doing is we're sharing people the Bible. We're just opening the Bible. We tell them, look, let's just do Bible things in Bible ways. Let's call Bible things by Bible names. Let's end this denominational division. Let's just be undenominational, simply members of Jesus' church, where we can share that message with people who already believe in Jesus, already have a high respect for the Bible. We have a lot of success, and historically always have. In India, these 14,000 plus per day who are converting are, by and large, a lot of them, most of them probably, becoming members of various denominations, as you kind of asked a little bit. But what you've got to understand is that means that our field for evangelism is becoming richer and richer and richer and richer and richer. Because in India, put yourself in their place. When I was not a Christian, I was raised nothing. I started becoming interested in things, spiritual and so on. I began driving around town. I'd say, well, here's that church. Boy, that's an interesting name. Wonder what that means. That's an interesting, I don't think I want anything to do that name. I don't think I like. What did I know? I knew nothing. I didn't know where to start or anything. Well, that's the way these Hindus are. They don't know, when they decide they want to question Hinduism, and they've heard of Jesus, of course they have. They've heard of Christians, of course they have. But when they want to start looking into it, they don't know where to go. So what are you going to do? We're just going to go to somebody. You're going to go to your neighbor, your friend, the church building down the street. You're going to do something like that. So who knows what denomination is going to teach them the basic ideas of who Jesus is versus Hindu idolatry and all of that stuff? When these former Hindus have converted to Jesus, they are not loyal to the denomination at all. Because these people aren't stupid. They recognize that which denomination they're a part of is just an accident. It could have been the next one as well as the other one, or the next one over there. They know that. Now, they love the members of their congregation that have taught them about Jesus. They're loyal to their teachers and so on, as you would expect anybody would be. But their ultimate loyalty is not to the denomination. Their ultimate loyalty, they didn't convert out of idolatry in order to embrace X denomination. They converted out of idolatry in order to embrace Jesus and in order to embrace the New Testament and the Bible. So, that means that when we walk in and just open the Bible and say, here's what it says, read it for what it says, they have an aha moment. And that's one of the reasons why our conversion rates are so high in India, is because these various denominations have plowed the field. We don't have to go in there and teach them about idolatry. They've already been taught that. We don't have to go in there and teach them who Jesus is. They've already been taught that. You see, now we do convert a good number of Hindus too. I'm not saying we don't. But I'm saying a large percentage, more than half of the people that we baptized into Christ have already decided they want to be loyal to Jesus. And so that helps our conversions a lot. Does that kind of get to your point? Maybe a little more than? Any other thoughts, ideas?
How's the family structure there?
The family structure?
Is it like father, mother, kids? They have grandparents living with them?
Yeah, their family structure is the same as ours in that sense. However, although it is suppressed, they do have sometimes multiple, polygamy, multiple wives. They don't have very much in the way of divorce over there. The reason they don't is because Hinduism and the caste system means you marry within your caste, but also the wife's parents and family give money or property to the groom's parents or caste. And so when you come to a divorce, you have to untangle all those financial relationships. And so they're hesitant to do that. A lot of times their families live very close to each other. The same grandparents and the parents and the kids and so on, all living in the very same house. Just absolutely the very same house. So their family relationships are somewhat complicated, but very strong, very strong. Does that kind of get to your point? Mm-hmm. Any other thought or idea? Yes?
And then you would also have the advantage of not having multi-generational ties to a denomination.
That's right. Nobody over there says my grandmother was a member of this denomination, my great uncle was a preacher in that denomination. They don't have that kind of denominational loyalty. And that is such a refreshing way to be able to do evangelism. One of the things we do over there is we hold what we call denominational preachers seminars. We go into a place. Now, as an American, I'm not allowed to teach Hindus, okay? I mean, they can come if they ask me a question, I can answer a question, okay? But I'm not allowed to just stand up here and preach to Hindus. But a denominational preacher seminar is where we go in, we rent a church building, a hall, or someplace like that, and we invite all the denominational preachers in the area to come. And they'll come for 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. 3 days is usually what we do. We'll provide them with lunch and with a little tea. You know, the word for tea in India is what? Chai, that's right. Chai isn't a special kind of tea in India, it's just tea. Well, and we'll go for 3 hours in the morning and 3 hours in the afternoon, and we'll teach them all kinds of things that you would normally want to talk to somebody who's a denominational preacher. We talk to them about the authority of Scripture. We talk to them about the difference between the Old Testament and the New Testament. We talk to them about the difference between a human denomination and the church that Jesus created. We talk to them about, you know, premillennialism, and we talk to them about, you know, Calvinism, and just all kinds of things that you might would imagine we would talk to them about. We do. And these denominational preachers will sit through, I mean, they'll sit on the concrete floor for 3 hours at a crack, and they will listen to this. And they will sometimes ask questions and occasionally get in some little vociferous conversations, but never like that. You see what I'm saying? And because they're not particularly, even their preachers are not particularly loyal to their denomination. In fact, the reason we call them denominational preachers seminars is because if you go and ask a preacher in the denomination in India, you say, "What are you?" "Oh, I am a denominational preacher." That's the words out of their mouth. And the next thing is, which denomination? Why? Because it doesn't matter. And so if they call themselves denominational preachers, well, that's what we call them. And so, does that kind of answer your question a little bit? Okay. Any other thoughts or ideas? Yes, sir.
Is there anything about the Indian government that helps your work or hinders your work?
There is something about the Indian government that helps our work, although, how many of you remember the story of Joseph being sold by his brothers into slavery? And of course you do. And you remember in Genesis 50, when Jacob has died, the brothers who Joseph has been revealed to as, you know, the second in command in Egypt and all, they figure he's going to get onto them in the way of revenge. And so the brothers, you know, say, "Hey, you know, our father wouldn't want you to take revenge on us." Joseph's response was simple. He said, "You meant it for evil. God meant it for good." So the government response in India, they meant it for evil, God meant it for good. All of us, in any other part of the world, almost any other part of the world, an American missionary can go in there and stay virtually as long as they want. Some of them for 3 months, some for 6 months, a lot for a year, 2 years, bring their family, 5 years, the rest of their life. And you know, that's the way it works. In almost every country in the world, it can work that way, and often does. In India, we're not allowed to do that. Every American I know has to come and go, come and go, come and go, come and go. You can either do a business visa or you can do a tourist visa. Most of us do tourist visas. And so those kinds of things mean we can come and go, but we have to come and go, okay? It also means if you're going to act like a tourist, you can't just settle in one little place, because what tourist does that? That's okay if you're in a huge city. You got a lot of things to see in that city if you want. But if you're out in the local smaller villages and all that, well, what are you going to see out there as a tourist? There's not very much. So you can go see this attraction and then move on, that kind of thing, all right? That's normal tourist behavior. Well, being tourists, we have to kind of look like tourists and act like tourists. This little thing right here is one of the nicest things that I have. Because every time I go into a little place, I can take pictures of a temple, I can take pictures of a cemetery, I can take pictures of a fortress. By the way, India has as many forts as you ever dreamed of Europe having. I mean, they've got lots of forts. And lots of them are very old. Well, anyway, point is this. We are forced to move around. What does that do? That means that we are forced to cultivate, train, educate, motivate, encourage edify local leaders. In places where the American can stay for years and years and years, it is very difficult. Now, I don't know a single missionary in any place who is not interested in cultivating local leadership. But there are some situations where it's easier and some places where it's harder. In a place where the American stays, well, it's like daddy runs the company and he wants to give the business to his kids. How easy is it for those kids to actually take over the leadership of the company? It takes quite a bit of time because the father's always there. But if the father vanishes for whatever reason, hopefully he doesn't die, maybe he retires, maybe he goes on vacation, extended, go world cruises and things like that, then the younger guy can step up into the leadership position. So what has happened is this: the Indian churches, by and large, their congregations are much stronger than mission congregations in other countries. And the reason is because we have been forced to focus on their leadership. Does that answer your question a little bit? So the government is actively pushing against us. That's the reason we got to act like a tourist. I can't tell you the number of times I've had an exit interview, which, when we go in the country, we get an interview with immigration. When we go out of the country, we have an interview with immigration. They're serious about this stuff, not like, the Americans. They're serious about that stuff. And it's not unusual for me to stand there as I get ready to leave the country. I give my passport to the immigration guy. He's sitting there looking at a computer, and he says, "Where'd you go?" And I said, "Well, I went here and here and here." And he says, yeah. He says, "I see that." He says, "What did you see while you're there?" And I tell him. Then he says, "Oh, but you also went to this little place and that place and this little place and that place," because they track us. And he says, "What'd you see there?" And that's where my little camera comes in handy. You see, we have to do that. And so you can see that that's a government-imposed thing. Satan and the government intend that to hinder our work. But I'm convinced that God has used it for good. I hope that makes you feel even better about this work. Yes, sir.
Them not allowing you to settle in one place and being forced to move around sounds a lot like Acts chapter 8.
It is. It is. The persecution spread the gospel all over the place. That's exactly right. The people who wanted to stay in Jerusalem were forced by the persecution to spread the gospel. Exactly so. I didn't get very far in my presentation, did I? Let me show you this one other thing here real quickly. Where's this? Let me show you this one other thing. That's the States. This is this map right here. This is the map I was telling you about. This is a language map of India. People sometimes ask me, do you speak the Indian language or any of the Indian languages? And the answer is, you can see here, everywhere you see a different color is a different language. Now, green in one place and green in another place doesn't mean those are the same language. All it just means is they're different from the surrounding colors. And so you can see we cross language borders almost every time we move from one place to the next. Our translators often can speak 3 languages, and English, of course, sort of. And so, no, I don't use. I don't know any of the Indian languages. I just can't even remember hardly how to say hello in that many different languages. I will teach you one thing that is in India, the Indian language. You ever go over there? One thing that's pretty common is this. You raise your pinky. That means, where's the bathroom? But anyway, so it's a way to close our presentation there. That's the situation we have to work with there. Any other last question or thought?
Yes,
Where?
over here. Do you know about how many deaf congregations there are in India?
Not one that I'm aware of. Now, I'm going to suggest to you that they are there. There's a lot going on that I don't know anything about. But not being deaf myself, and India not being a country that focuses on trying to help people with various disabilities, India just doesn't really worry about those things. So they're all under the radar. I just really can't answer much of a question on that. I'm sorry about that. Any other thoughts or ideas? Okay, well, thank you very much.
I throw one bag, I throw two bags, if I get 4 or 5. 4 is 3, it's about 8. 2 or 3 good meals.